I'm going to introduce Peggy Flannery. She's a principal on the investment team at Generate Capital, where she's helped build the firm's community solar investment strategy. She's focused on leading project acquisitions, joint development agreements, and in the U.S. commercial and industrial space for distributed solar assets. So thank you, Peggy, for joining us. And I think we're shifting over screens at the moment, but thank you for joining us.
Great, thanks for having me. Good morning, everyone. I'm Peggy Flannery. I'm a principal on the investment team at Generate Capital. And I'm really excited to be here to talk to you about our work in solar and storage. Before we get into that, let me tell you a little bit about Generate Capital. We are a sustainable infrastructure investment company with over 2,000 assets all over the world in the US, Canada, Brazil, and Europe. And we invest in a number of different sectors: clean energy, waste, water, transportation, and digital infrastructure. And we're both an investment company and an operating platform. As Rob said, I lead our solar investments and have a really strong focus in community solar, which represents over $400 million worth of assets on our balance sheet. Generate was actually an early investor in community solar. We started investing there in 2017. And at that time, not a lot of investors were looking at the space. But we were really drawn by the potential of this market to really expand access to clean energy for a lot of folks who had not traditionally been able to get solar. And that was a really exciting potential, and we've been really excited to see how much that has grown. And I think I've been reflecting a bit on the things that I really appreciate about my job lately. And, you know, while connecting over Zoom like this is really great in a lot of ways and really convenient, what I really love to do is go out and see these projects in the communities where they're actually located. And some of the things that I appreciate the most are when I go to these towns, I can see the benefits that they bring to a lot of different stakeholders. Number one, they actually provide tax revenue for the towns that host these, as well as jobs in those communities. And then number two, they deliver direct savings to the customers and subscribers who participate in the projects. And so that's a really good example of how in the clean energy transition, a lot, many different stakeholders should be benefiting from this. So on to a little bit about the projects that we're working on. Last year, we completed our first solar and storage projects in New York State. We did those with our development partner, Cypress Creek Renewables. And these solar and storage projects are really shaping up to be a really key part of our energy future for a couple of reasons. Number one, they add resiliency to the grid. Community solar projects are decentralized energy resources that are spread out and delivering energy at the distribution level of the electric grid. And when I first started working in distributed energy, I learned that when you generate electricity closer to where it's used, you actually add a fair amount of resiliency and stability to the grid. And our portfolio of over now 200 megawatts of community solar projects in New York State will provide over 35,000, will provide power to over 35,000 local homes this year. And for our projects that include storage, we're helping the grid by also storing energy midday when solar is producing a lot of energy, and then as the sun begins to set and that's the solar generation starts to come down, we actually boost that up with the energy that's been stored in batteries. So again, we're generating more electricity closer to where it's being used and at a time when it's really needed on the grid. So another reason why these are really important for our energy future is that individuals and large companies are really demanding options for how to participate in renewable energy. And one of the most exciting things about community solar is that it has the potential to increase equitable access to clean energy. So customers of all types are really saying they want to participate in this. And what the great thing about our projects is that not just large corporations can participate here. It's small businesses, residents who can really participate in these. And then finally, we believe that these will continue to be an important part of our energy future because of the forward-looking policies that are in place to drive change. New York State, where a lot of our projects are, has a really ambitious decarbonization goal to reach 10 gigawatts of distributed solar by 2030. And New York just announced that it had reached 1 gigawatt of community solar. So that's the largest market in the country and so exciting. And so in New York and elsewhere, we're really proud to be a part of helping to shape and work through new regulatory frameworks and financing models. And these will enable more adoption and create more energy savings for customers. So we're seeing a number of different states start to expand incentives for deployment of solar. We're seeing that in Colorado, Maryland, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. And at Generate, we're also building platforms to accommodate the increasing demand. So we recently invested in Nexamp, which is a decarbonization platform with its roots in community solar. And we think that that's also really well positioned to deploy assets across multiple states. So that brings me to Generate's role in financing the energy transition. We have our roots in the Bay Area of California, which is the land of software startups and tech companies. But we often have to remind people that we don't finance energy projects the way that software startups raise money. This is infrastructure, investing in infrastructure financing. So we need long-term funding that matches the capital intensity of the projects. And at Generate, we're often working to solve a classic problem that developers face. Early in the development or deployment of a new market or technology, costs are really high to get these projects going. But as we deploy those assets and we build scale, we're able to achieve a lot of efficiencies and also learn from our experiences and build more projects. And by proving that a technology or a market can operate at scale, we encourage additional investments into the sector at a lower cost. We call this the bridge to bankability. And at Generate, we provide the flexible capital that companies need to deploy these projects at scale, whether that's growth equity, project financing, or even construction loans, and ensure that these assets are set up to operate for the full useful life. So there's a lot of complexity in deploying clean energy assets, but it's definitely worth it. I've spent over a decade now working in the solar industry, and I'm proud to have witnessed the lowering of costs to build solar. And I'm even more proud now that, to say that solar power is the world's cheapest form of electricity. It's the cheapest, fastest growing, and most built form of power in most parts of the world. And storage adds a really important part to that to help, increase the way that we manage electricity on the grid. So integrating solar and storage means that we can increase the availability of energy while delivering predictable, clean energy to the grid. So scientists say that we have approximately 10 years to completely bend and reverse the current trajectory of carbon pollution and climate change. And we really want to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. And the worst impacts would be humanitarian and environmental disasters. So that means that we have to deploy the technology that we have available to us today at scale like we've never seen before. And I'm just so energized and thrilled to see us rise to the challenge to be a part of that with some of the projects that we've been working on. So thank you.
Thanks, Peggy. And having been also around the solar industry when it was $8 a watt back in the day, I definitely do appreciate how far the industry's come. And one of the things that I wanted to tease out before maybe some questions pop up, could you touch a little bit more on how it works for Generate being both an operator as well as a financing and platform? Just because I think obviously lots of asset owners or financiers will take care of those things, but I feel like the DNA of Generate is a little more operator focused. Can you speak to that a little bit more? I think it's one of the things that makes you guys a great partner in my experience.
Yeah, I think, first I'll just say that I think that, one of the things that I appreciate so much about Generate is the fantastic team that we have. And I think that our team is pretty unique. I come from a developer background. I worked at a developer for over 7 years and then really wanted to take what I had learned in that space and bring it to an investment firm. And a lot of my colleagues do have that really deep sector experience and expertise. I think that's one thing that sets us apart. And so when we're talking with developers about how we can help them, we understand a lot of the challenges that they're facing. And we like to supplement, a lot of their capabilities with the things that we have in-house. So we have, for example, on my team, we're, a handful of investment professionals, but we work really closely with our colleagues. We have a number of folks who help us to deliver projects. Once we acquire them, we help to bring them all the way to COD or commercial operation. And then we also have our colleagues in our asset management team who help to oversee the projects once they're operating. So folks who have really deep, again, sector expertise, who know what are the challenges that can come up on solar projects. They know, how to work really effectively with our financing counterparties. So when we work with tax equity and debt providers, they know what, how to serve those partners as well. So I think it really is, it helps us to be a more effective partner and to ultimately deploy more projects because we're able to, really serve our partners, so our development partners really well by understanding where they're coming from and understanding how we can deliver a lot of great solutions to them, but also, tacking on our own resources and expertise to help really just bring a whole kind of solution forward.
Thanks, I appreciate that. And can you touch on, and I think this builds off of that you mentioned, you'll also do construction loans or some other, I guess, pre-development side. As having once tried to be a project developer myself, I think I understand how valuable that can be. So can you, I think, that plays to both where you're getting engaged, but also the different parts of the capital stack and you can help with.
Yes. So I think actually the way that we first started investing in New York Community Solar was through a development loan. The market was really early. Not a lot of projects were being built yet. I think a lot of investors didn't really know, weren't comfortable jumping in yet. But we saw an opportunity to come in and help a developer partner with a loan to really start to finance some interconnection expenses for a broad portfolio. So again, I think what we're really trying to do is ultimately deploy more assets, but find ways to add value to our partners. And one way to do that is to get in earlier and provide a lot of different types of capital. So last year we launched Generate Credit, which is, we had been doing a number of lending activities, but we're now doing that with a dedicated team who is going out and providing, financing for either, development, construction, or, long-term debt on projects that are operating. So again, really trying to provide a lot of different solutions, and we're just continuing to expand from. I think our roots were really in asset ownership, but we've continued to expand and find more solutions to how to really be the capital provider for this energy transition.
Another question kind of builds off the one in the Q&A, and I'm going to think about it a little bit more broadly than just, hey, here's the whole life cycle of panels and where they're produced, or some of the things that are not there that gets into calculation versus the, as you said, you've got to go to, we have 10 years to deploy assets. What can we put in the ground right now that starts to work? Can you speak to your approach on that and how you might look at it both as an investor or as an operator of, I'm putting in panels that are going to be only 20% efficient, or these might not be the best. We've had to source differently because of supply chain or whatever constrictions. How that looks to you as a long-term asset owner and investor for obsolescence or replacement, because to the issue that came up earlier in one of the other speakers, buildings are most of what 70-80% we're going to be here. That's how we're addressing other parts of the stack. So I think that's one of the things right now of, yes, we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good now is where you guys are moving, but how are you planning for innovations or improvements on assets you have in, or how do you work those in as you're in a long-term arrangement with a developer or a partner or an asset?
That's a really good question. I think supply chain is something that is on everybody's mind right now, not just in our industry. I think there are just really wide-ranging impacts, frankly, across many industries and across the whole world right now. So it's definitely something that we're spending a lot of time thinking about, talking about. And I would just say, broadly, we have a really, we're really always looking to do both, deploy what we have now, proven technologies, but also be really open-minded about what's next and how do we help to support and provide capital to, the folks who are looking at, new technologies that, can really disrupt the industry. I think that, maybe more specifically on solar supply chain, there's obviously been a lot of discussion about that. For the most part, we're using, polysilicon panels. And we definitely are, just with the industry in terms of how to really try to find a good solution. Mm-hmm. In general for sourcing. And I'll just say, one of the things that we're spending a lot of time thinking about right now is, how do we plan for this year and many years in it, into the future for how we actually can sustainably source enough solar panels for all the projects that we want to deploy.
And the last question before we go to our final speaker of the day, since Peter's got me doing a little extra into lunch duty, is really kind of tied to circling back to your core on the solar and storage and community solar. How has storage, is that something you're tied to lithium ion, or again, it's whatever technology is available for site, and how is that impacting costs, for example, since we've mentioned the cost of solar has come down and obviously storage is dropping quite a bit, but how does that play into affordability and some of the other project economics?
A great question. I'll I think that the cost has certainly come down. I would say that, yes, we are using lithium ion for the projects that we're deploying in New York State right now. But I know I have a number of colleagues who are more specifically looking at different battery technologies. And there are a wide variety of those, and I think that we should just continue to explore all of the options that we have available. And again, as I mentioned earlier today, as we can scale and really deploy these to start seeing how they're operating, really working out some of the challenges, that's how we continue to be able to drive down cost, not just to create the equipment and the technology, but to deploy them at scale and then bring down the cost of financing them as well.
That's great, Peggy. Thank you so much for your time and all the info about Generate and how you're making community solar